there, folks. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you what we are creating and how we're going to move forward with the coil pots that we are designing. So at this point, if you're working remotely at home, I gave everybody a clay mat. I gave you a rolling pin, a container for water. You'll have a felting knife and you'll have some kind of wooden tool. You also have a plastic, well, it's not plastic, but it's covered in plastic, a masonite tray to put your work on. And the first thing you want to do with some of your clay is you're going to need to make a base. So you want to make sure that you are wedging your clay. And in the first video that I shared with you, if you're wedging it properly, you're pushing in and down at the same time. And eventually you start to see a coiling pattern on your clay. So I've wedged this up a little bit, and I'm not going to use all of it. I'm going to use some of it to create my base. So I'm just going to cut some of this here, and this clay is a little bit stiffer than what you have, so I'm just going to flatten it just a little bit. And instead of digging right in with my rolling pin, because what tends to happen is if you're too aggressive with rolling it out, you might get it a little too thin. But here's a trick. If you happen to have a couple of pens that are the same height, because of course pens have certain width to them, or you have a couple pencils hanging around, what this will do is as you roll it out, you won't go any thinner than those things that you've put under there. So it's really super handy. So you want to use your upper body strength to start to roll out this clay. Now I'm starting to elongate here, so I'm going to take the clay and I'm just going to pick it up and move it in the other direction so I can start spreading it out in the other direction. Okay, and I think I used a little bit too little clay, so I'm just going to go a little bit further there, but I don't want it to go too thin. And think about it in terms of your pinky finger. You don't want to go any thinner than that because things can happen that way, and we don't want that to transpire. Okay, we don't want anything bad to happen. So once you have your slab of clay, look around your house and see what you got. I just happen to have this old chupani container, and you want to use something circular. So if I put this on top here, I've just about made a circle, which is going to work out beautifully. So I'm going to take my felting knife. You can also use a wooden tool, and I'm just going to go around this piece, gently cutting through the clay to create the round base that I need. And I'm just going to move some of my extra clay off and away here. And you know, if you make a little ding in the side, no big deal, because you know it's clay and you can just kind of smooth it out, which is nice. All right, so I've got my base here. And something you might notice if your clay is a little bit more moist than the clay that I'm working with, if you just go to try to peel it up, it might distort your bottom here, your round bottom. But the nice thing is that these mats, you can move a bit, and you can actually take this and just gently peel it away from the clay, and you can pick up this round bottom piece, and I would suggest that you put it right on your tray, because you'll want to be able to move your tray, and it's so much easier to do that than to move your whole mat. So much easier. Okay, so at this point, you'll have your clay bottom. This is going to be the bottom to your coil pot. So I'm just going to move this over for a moment here. And I'm going to take some of the clay, like I showed you the other day in the video, and you're going to compress it in your hand, kind of like you're making a little like mini hot dog, as it were. Maybe a little bit longer than a mini hot dog. What are those called? Pigs in a blanket, something like that. And now you're going to roll a coil, okay? So taking your hand, apply a little bit of pressure, and you're going to move your hand by rolling it over the clay from side to side, side to side. And sometimes what happens is your clay kind of puts itself into kind of like a rectangular kind of shape here. Ooh, get that out of the way. Sorry about that. Creates like a rectangular shape, so it's thinner on one edge and fatter on the other. And if that happens, just compress it a little bit to kind of make it go back to a coil. Now, when you're making your coils, couple things. Do not make any coils smaller than your pinky finger. Couple reasons. One, you need to be able to build adequately moving up because you're going to put coils on top of coils. And also, it'll take you a lot longer to go up if you have many, many coils. Now, at the end of a coil, if you get anything that kind of looks like this, like there's an air space in there, just cut that part off because we don't want that. All right. Now, we're going to attach a piece of clay to a piece of clay, and there's a process for that. So on your coil, you want to make some lines. Okay, now I'm not cutting through my clay. I'm just making lines on top of the clay. And as I mentioned before, to help create suction, you got to use water and you've got to score where you're putting your clay pieces. Now I'm noticing that my coil is not going to go all the way around this round space. That's okay, because I can roll another coil and put it in the space that is missed. So I just went around the outside, and now I'm going to put some water around the outside of my base and on my coil, and now I'm going to attach it. And all I'm doing is putting it right on top of the hashtag marks that I made, the scoring. And I can make another coil to add to this piece right here. Okay, so maybe I'll do that right now. Move this up here just for a second. Some coils, depending on how much clay you use, will be longer than others, and that's okay. If you find the surface, oh, there it goes, it's starting to do that thing again where it's chunky on one side and thinner on the other, so I'm going to go ahead and compress this right here. You're going to keep building coil on top of coil. And if you notice at any point the top part of your the lip that you've created is a little bit uneven, try putting a fatter coil where it depresses a little bit and then put a thinner coil where it's a little bit too thick. All right, so I'm matching this up and I'm noticing I need probably about this much. That would probably work, but I've got to add the scoring. So I've got to add that in there, that part in there, and I got to add the water, a little bit more water there. And I'm going to fit that right in, just like that. Okay, and I'm going to smooth this edge here. Now, what I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to pick this up so I can better show you. I like using a wooden tool that kind of looks like it's got a spoon edge to it. And I dip that in water, and then what I do is I connect and seal this together. So I would move along the edge, and you can bring clay up or down. I always go in the direction where there's more clay, so there's more clay up top by this ring that I've added, this coil. So I'm going to smooth down, and you can also use your finger to smooth that out nicely. And you want to go all the way around the piece to eliminate the seam. I know that's a little bit bright there, but you want to take away that seam because as clay dries, it shrinks. And when it shrinks, different pieces could unstick. I have pulled coil pots out of the kiln where ringlets have come apart because students have not scored or add water or smoothed. So make sure that you are scoring, adding water, and smoothing every level that you build up, okay? And we want to go up, we're looking at probably, let's see, probably about to the knife blade, if that's a good measurement for you, because everybody has this, probably about there, and that's about 4 or 5 inches. That's about how high we're going to go, okay? Now, when you've built all the way up and you've smoothed, you can smooth the inside too if you want to. Some students really like that. Some students don't, but definitely smooth the outside. Your goal is to create some holes around the rim. And how you would do that is if you have a piece of clay, so here's my piece of clay, I'm going to pretend for a second that this is the wall that I'm carving into. Take your felting knife, press it in through the clay, okay, and then you're going to rotate it. Carefully rotate it, and then you can take it out, and you'll notice that you've got a nicely sized hole and you can pull out, you know, anything that's kind of gross and just sort of hanging in there. And then, of course, you can take your sponge, your finger, and smooth everything out. But that's how you can make a nice hole into your piece. Now, you'll notice here in the picture that there are rings all the way around the outside. What I would do is make a hole across from that hole, then go to the halfway part in between, make a hole, go to the halfway mark in between, make a hole, and then go to the sections, make another hole, another hole, another hole, another hole. Okay? The reason we're doing that is because we're actually going to put some reed through this and tie it, and then we're going to weave right through the reed, which is kind of cool. So we'll end up with some really interesting sculptural pieces. But that will happen. That'll be like the very last step after we glaze these. So again, you want to make sure that you're scoring on the coil and the base, building up probably about this far on your knife, roughly, and really smooth and refined, because anything that's kind of chunky that's left becomes sharp when it is put into the kiln. Turn the light off there a little bit. Oh, you can see that much better. So see, like this spot right here, that's going to become really rough. So smooth everything out. When you bring this in, you can keep it right on the tray, bring all of your clay working tools back. I'll take all that stuff and I'll let you know when it's time to actually do the glazing. If you're working on this and you're like, oh, I got to take a break, cover everything. Don't leave your clay out. Make sure it's bagged up, because clay likes to dry out. And drying out clay, if it's not finished, that's a problem, okay? Because you want this to be nice and workable. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. But this is kind of a fun process. I think you're going to enjoy it. And feel free to send pictures. If you have questions, I'm happy to help. Okay?